This is the third Friday of the month, WILF San Jose branch meeting. We've been doing this for I don't know how long, decades probably. And now here we are on Zoom managing, and I welcome everyone. We have a tradition of starting our meetings with the Raging Grannies, but singing online doesn't work very well. So, what we do is we have one person who sings who is not muted. And tonight that is Rowan.
The courts are all fair, don't you know? The talking heads all tell us so. Though corporate media would like to mislead ya, it ain't necessarily so. Now Mitch has been packing the courts to make it a crime to abort, and all the Republicans just want to drub women. Crushing our rights is a sport. So Judge Amy Coathanger Barrett was rammed through regardless of merit, 'cause she was selected to betray her sex. You can bet she's as ruthless as Brett. We thought we were safe under Roe, but Texas has dealt it a blow. Now more GOP states are racing to duplicate, seeing how low they can go. It's all about punishing females. Just look at the Texas law's details. The law is designed to make healthcare a crime and give absolute power to males. The freedoms and rights that we know just ain't necessarily so, 'cause what they are brewing will be our undoing. We're safer in old Mexico. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the fire of women's rage, kept smoldering for centuries, now flaming in this age. We won't go back to hangers, and we will not be enslaved. We'll keep on marching on. Now women-hating men attempt to occupy the land. They legalize misogyny just like the Taliban. They're terrorizing women and they're called Republicans. Their tyranny be damned. Rise up, women, join together. Turn the tables on oppressors. We shall not retreat, not ever, for women's time has come. Religious zealots bully women with medieval rules. They think they're doing God's work, but they're only being tools. They're stooges for the power brokers, and their scheme is cruel, but we won't be subdued. They want to take us back when the only rights were men's. They want to choose how many kids we have and even when. And what we wear from burqas to bikinis just for them. Those old ways we condemn. We'll keep raging at these rallies. No more dying in back alleys. We are free and ever shall be, for women's time has come. Listen, boys, our rights will not be taken or postponed. Our bodies are inviolate, a government-free zone. My bedroom and my right to choose are mine and mine alone, for we shall not be owned. The patriarchy's over now, we claim our rightful power. Let's build a new society with caring at its core, and never raise our children to be fodder for men's wars, for women's time has come. Rise up, women, join together. Solidarity forever. We shall not retreat, not ever, for women's time has come.
Thank you, Rowan. Okay, did everybody sing to their hearts? Just wow. Time we'll have a chance again at the end. I'm really delighted to welcome our speaker tonight. My activism actually began back at the Planned Parenthood building at 1691, the Alameda in San Jose, when I was a volunteer and then an employee there. So I have a special connection to the Planned Parenthood's deep in my bones, but also the timing. Tomorrow is the 49th anniversary of the Supreme Court decision known as Roe v. Wade. And here to speak with us tonight is Dianna Zamora-Marroquin. Did I say that right, more or less? Oh dear. Who is the Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Mar Monte. Her career has focused on equity and civic engagement, leading her to develop the political program for a local labor council, work for a renowned research firm in San Diego, and live in Washington, D.C., working for 2 California congressmen. Dianna serves on numerous boards that focus on diversity, equity, healthcare, and women's rights. Dianna earned a bachelor's degree in international relations from the University of Southern California, master's degree in global leadership with a certification in project management from the University of San Diego. So here, please help me welcome the Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Mar Monte, Dianna.
Thank you all so much. Thank you for that wonderful welcome. I'm going to share my screen. And if folks can't see it, please let me know. Can everyone see this? Get a thumbs up. Great. Okay. Well, as Paula mentioned, my name is Dianna, and I'm the Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Mar Monte. Specifically, I cover the Silicon Valley Coast region, and I will be taking over Alameda County while one of my colleagues is out for a couple of months on parental leave. So I am your point person for all things Planned Parenthood in the area. Again, thank you so much for having me join you today. This is an open conversation. I'm here to share some of the stuff that give you a little bit of past, present, and future, if you will. So if there are any questions, I do have a slide at the end for questions, but folks can feel free to interject before that if they'd prefer. While sharing my screen, it's a little hard for me to see everyone, so I'm not ignoring you. I probably just haven't seen you. And also just quickly, I apologize if I need to take a break at some point. I've been feeling a little under the weather, so every now and then the coughing fits get me, but I should be okay. So as Paula mentioned, Roe turns 49 tomorrow, and we are very, very cautiously optimistic that we will get to celebrate a 50th. So this is a really pivotal point for not just Planned Parenthood Mar Monte, but also just for reproductive rights in this country overall. So I wanted to start out by just giving a quick overview of the current landscape. I'm sure the majority of you have been following this and are quite familiar. But in case you haven't, just yesterday, the Supreme Court gave another blow to reproductive rights. They, again, had the opportunity to stop what's going on in Texas. And they, yet again, rejected doing anything. So the 6-week abortion ban in Texas continues. The 3 more liberal justices were obviously enraged to the point where, while it's a one-word difference, it is particularly meaningful and was actually called out by CNN. When they write dissents, they typically write, "I respectfully dissent." Justice Sotomayor just wrote, "I dissent" at the end of the writing. And so while it's, like I mentioned, just a one-word difference, it really just goes to show how badly this court is doing by continuing to step aside instead of actually doing what they should be doing, which is stopping what's going on in Texas. If folks, for any reason, are not totally familiar with what's happening in Texas, there's a 6-week abortion ban, which is problematic for a number of reasons. One is that that's often before a person even knows that they're pregnant. There are no exceptions for rape or incest, as another point. And third, if I'm just picking the top 3 reasons, or 3 of the many reasons, is that it basically deputizes normal citizens, everyday citizens, to be the ones actually enforcing this law. So if you are a if you are a provider, if you are a nurse, if you are the Uber driver or the Lyft driver that drove a patient to a health center, if you are a family member who helps them pay for it, you can all be subjected to a lawsuit. And the folks that will be doing that, again, are ordinary citizens that have absolutely no connection to the patient or to anyone, involved. So it's really, it really just creates a space where, like I said, they become bounty hunters, for lack of a better term. So that's one issue that we're dealing with, and that just happened yesterday, like I said. And then, as we know, this year, at some point, we will be hearing the big case, if you will. And that case is Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. This is the Mississippi law that it's often referred to that way. And this Mississippi is looking to do a 15-week ban. If they do a 15-week ban, and the Supreme Court rules in favor of that, it will effectively overturn Roe versus Wade. So it will overturn nearly 50 years of precedents that we've seen in this country. The significance of that is massive. And I'd like to now show you what a post-Roe United States would look like. So if you look at this map, everything that is pink, they're good. As good as can be, right? The abortion laws there are protected. You'll notice that California and Nevada are both in there. Planned Parenthood Mar Monte covers areas of California and of Nevada. But you're also going to notice that there's a lot of gray. And then in that gray, there are some other sort of colors mixed in. Some of these are states, the yellow ones, that had pre-Roe bans. Those that are sort of maroon in color are trigger bans. So as soon as Roe was overturned, their anti-abortion laws go into place. And then there's some blue states that had both trigger and pre-Roe abortion bans. So if you look at this map, this is just a visual example of how incredibly stark that change is going to be should the Supreme Court decide to overturn Roe. In fact, just to give another perspective of how important states like California are, it has been said that there will now be, from 46,000 people, it will now go up to about 1.4 million people who will find California as a place in California as our next closest provider. That's a 3,000% increase. So that's a massive number of folks that will suddenly no longer have services close enough to them. And California, a whole different state, will be the next closest place that you can go. So again, just to sort of emphasize why the work we do in California is so incredibly important. But also that's a massive responsibility, right? That as California, we're undertaking. And thinking about California and Nevada, which I said is also one area that we cover at Planned Parenthood Mar Monte, I want to talk a little bit about why it's so important that we keep fighting. And also the differences that happen even just within the region that Planned Parenthood Mar Monte itself covers. So to start, I want to just really touch briefly on Nevada, because I think this is a really interesting example. We're really fortunate. We live in an area where it's progressive. Our elected officials by large are supportive of reproductive rights. They're supportive of equality. They're supportive of equity. And not every place in California is like that. And I will get to that in a moment. But I also wanted to talk about how Nevada is such an interesting place, because it's a great example of how if what you truly care about is the human and his bodily autonomy and his reproductive health, it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on, and it shouldn't matter. And so to give an example of that, in the late 1980s, women in the state of Nevada came together to work on a plan to make sure that abortion rights were protected under Roe v. Wade, just to put safeguards in there, regardless of whether the decision was overturned. So they had seen, as we see now, various laws in various states passing laws that were going to actually remove the right if Roe v. Wade was overturned, and they didn't want that happening in Nevada. So the women who participated in this effort, which later came to be known as the Freedom of Choice Act, were actually from both parties, and they were from all walks of life. One of them was Lieutenant Governor Sue Wagner. She was actually the first woman ever elected to the office of Lieutenant Governor, and she was a Republican. The other person that was really instrumental was the Attorney General Frankie Sue Del Papa, also the first woman to be elected to that position, but she was a Democrat. And so with the help of these two women and then various other folks in the community, they came together to form a ballot initiative. And in order for this ballot initiative to change the law, it had to be passed through 2 rounds of voting by the Nevada citizens. So this was not an easy process. This was a very complex and time-consuming commitment. And in 1990, the initiative passed the second round of votes, which it needed, and the Freedom of Choice Act was secured into law. So what makes this special, besides the bipartisan effort, which unfortunately we don't see nowadays, is that this act cannot be legislated again. And to make any changes to the law, it will now take the same effort it makes to make a change to the Nevada Constitution. So while technically abortion isn't enshrined in the Constitution, it's enshrined in the status of Nevada, and the laws to overturn that require the same effort as it would take to overturn something in the Nevada Constitution. So that to me is such an amazing example of how this should not be a partisan issue. This is a human rights issue. This is a health issue. And so I bring that up because that is such an example of how you don't need to be a bleeding heart liberal, as they love to call some folks, or as they like to call the left, to care about reproductive health, right? This next section, I want to talk about why it's so important to keep fighting in California. As we saw on the other map, and as we know, California is a beacon for reproductive health care. Governor Newsom has really made strides to make sure that efforts are made to show that California is going to be a safe haven for those that are looking for services. And so this would be a section that I would edit out of what goes up on the website. But I want to explain why California is so important. So in the area that Planned Parenthood Mar Monte itself represents, we have Kern County, right? So down by Bakersfield, we have all of Central California. So Fresno, Merced, Madera. And then we go up into Nevada, Sacramento, we have Monterey, Santa Cruz. It's the largest affiliate in the entire country. My colleague that works in Central California has a very different life and job experience than I do. Just today I talked to her and she was recounting stories about how a little before she started, one of our health centers was lit on fire. When they tried to open a health center, and this is like within the last 15, 20 years, one of the staff members from Planned Parenthood that was sort of like the face of opening the health center, had to get protection from the FBI because they had planted bombs and were threatening her life. And this is in California, right? So I'm not talking about some other place that it's kind of expected. A handful of years ago, the city of Bakersfield was trying to pass laws so that women in their city couldn't access birth control and abortion. And it was so egregious that their city attorney had to tell them that they would be sued if they did it. And the city attorney reached out to Planned Parenthood and to the ACLU to talk to the city council to tell them, this is illegal, you cannot do this. And they just kept forging ahead because they didn't care. Sometimes we think to ourselves, oh, but we live in California. And then we're in the Bay Area. So we're like, we're in the Bay Area. I am fortunate. Most of my elected officials, like I said, they're happy to talk to me. I have good relationships with them. They're like, what bill can we sign on to? Central California is not that way. And even those that are supportive are like supportive at a distance, right? And so just building that trust and that momentum and that security for everyone else is for those folks that are there, and the healthcare workers that are there is really, really important. So just a little bit of a background on like the diversity of the region that Mar Monte covers, because it's very, very diverse, the population that we serve, the issues that we face. And so there's a lot of different fronts that we are trying to proactively work on and fight on. Things that we're doing to prepare for the fall of Roe. I like to consider myself an optimist. I took a test one time and it said it was it was my 5th top quality that I'm an optimist. But I'm also, I guess I live in this world, so I have to be a bit of a realist. And based on everything that the Supreme Court has shown us, I am not holding my breath that they do the correct thing and that they actually uphold Roe. So if they don't uphold Roe, what are we doing? We're doing a lot. Again, as the largest affiliate in the country and being in California, we have a very big responsibility on our shoulders, and we don't take that lightly. So one of the things that we're working to do is expanding healthcare locations and sizes. The story I just told you in Central California is an example of an attempt to expand. We'll see how that plays out. But I can say that like in my region, we are expanding to our health centers into larger areas because we realize that we need a larger footprint. We are going to be getting exponentially more patients, and we have to balance taking care of the folks that are coming to us while still continuing to care for the people within our area and our region, right? Because those folks aren't going away either. So that's one of the things that we're doing throughout our entire affiliate is looking at where we're going to continue to expand expand locations or expand the size of the location that we currently have if possible. We're also increasing our laboratory capacity. So we're investing a ton in a brand new state-of-the-art lab where we can do so many more tests. We can get things done much more quickly because we're expecting an influx of folks. The other thing to remember is that we don't just provide abortions. We do tons of STI testings. We do cancer testing, right? We do blood testing because we're primary care doctors. We do gender affirming care, which often requires hormone therapy. And so all of that requires the use of a laboratory. So really soundly investing in like the technology that will allow us to be successful and to take on that influx of folks while continuing to serve our base population is essential. We're also investing a ton in provider training. So we are really upping our game when it comes to being the folks that are training other people. One of two things can happen. Folks can say, I'm staying in California because California might end up having a need for more providers because we're going to get so many more patients. Or they may say, I'm going to go back to, back home. And now I have a skill set that was really hard for me to learn in my home state because those folks don't value the work that I do. So we are definitely working on training all health center staff and like making that a much more robust program so we can get more folks trained up. We're also supporting out-of-state providers, of course. We are looking at, and in a later slide, I have abortion funds. If folks are interested in donating to abortion funds or just even knowing what else is out there, we're looking at that. We're also thinking about creative ways that when people come, if you're coming from out of state, you might need childcare. You may have had to take time off work. Also, how did you get here and where are you sleeping? And you need to eat. So these are all added expenses that many folks don't have access to. And what we never want to see is a family having to make a decision or a person having to make a decision in which they say, am I paying my rent? Am I eating? Or am I accessing healthcare? Am I going to get the abortion that I want and need? So trying to also think of ways and expand like how we take care of the whole person, not just the service. And then finally, we are thinking of creative ways to develop legislation to protect and protect future patients and further protect the patients we have. Again, we're fortunate that California has these great laws, but we are also looking at different sites that do have more protesters and figuring out what legislation we can do kind of per site that might help. Because the other thing that we're preparing for is, we know who our protesters are, generally speaking, right? It's the same folks going to the same places. We mostly have a read on you. But if Roe falls, where are all of the folks that are anti-abortion, anti-reproductive rights? Are they just going to stay in their state, or are we going to be a target for them? And are they going to come on their weekends and start protesting? And who knows who those folks are? I don't know. A Texas protester might be different than the ones that show up in the Bay Area, right? So how do we make sure that we protect our folks? How do we make sure that we give, law enforcement the tools they need? How do we make sure also that like our providers and our health center workers are taken care of? So that's some of the stuff that we're doing in preparation for the fall of Roe. And with that said, I want to talk quickly about some of the stuff that folks can do, because I think that's the most critical part is how do we get involved? How do we make a difference? And I have a variety of options because I know that donating financially isn't always a possibility for everyone. So that'll just be one option of the ones that I present. So one of the things that you can do is going to our website. If you go where it says get involved and you look down from there, you can donate. Like on the website, it'll say donate locally. You can click there and donate in any way, shape, or form. There's also a tab where it says to volunteer locally. And under there, you have 3 options. And these are all options that just cost time. They don't cost anything financially. You can subscribe to our e-newsletter, which will give you all of the volunteer opportunities that we have coming up. Excuse me. And also let you know just sort of what's going on is a general kind of overview. You can also just view the current volunteer opportunities that are happening sort of like in real time. And then you can also share your story. We have forums where if you have a story about reproductive care of any sort, you can share with us, because one of the things that we're realizing is that sharing the human story is critical to putting like a human face and a human element on it. And when I think about it from a public affairs perspective, being able to explain and being able to hear a person's words and their lived story is so powerful. And it's more powerful, than when you sit in a room and you hear someone say, this is how this changed my life, having this opportunity or not having this opportunity. That can be really critical, just sort of, putting that human element on it. And also reminding people that all sorts of folks from all backgrounds, of all ages, of all ethnic groups, of all religious backgrounds need to be able to access these services without any judgment, right? It's care no matter what. You can also go on our social media if that's something you like. That's a good place to sort of just see sort of like the quick, the fancy, what's going on, what's the latest and greatest and newest, and it pops up. So these are other options as well, and these are all of our handles. I'm also happy to put all of this in a quick email, shoot it over to Paula, and then that way you can send it out if that's easy. And then the other thing that I'd mentioned it to do is contributing to Ppfa vetted abortion funds. So these are funds that are the Federation of America, the Planned Parenthood Federation of America has vetted. And these are all funds that are going towards helping women. And you'll notice most of these are in Texas. Helping them access abortion care. Some of them are a little bit more like specific, like there's one that works exclusively, I think, with African American women. There's one that sort of focuses on people that are like younger, but these are just options in case that is something that is of interest to folks. And I can also send this list to Paula, no problem. And then the final thing I wanted to share is what our upcoming events are. So this is just a snapshot so that you can kind of get a feel for the stuff that we do. These are all volunteer events. Right now, everything that we are doing is virtual. So we are not asking anyone to show up in person anywhere, just for health and wellness. But these are just some examples of what we have coming up. And I can also send out the links for all of this if folks would like to participate in any of these. So, and some of these are just sort of things that you can listen in on. Some of these are trainings, right? And some of them are also a little bit about like learning just more about what Planned Parenthood is, right? And like just a little bit, like a quick understanding, like that's the Planned Parenthood 101. Our I Love Planned Parenthood storytelling action hour. Trains you on sort of how to tell your story, right? And here it says how to tell your Planned Parenthood story. But if you have another story that's just about reproductive healthcare, that's fine too. Those stories are all welcome. It doesn't have to be Planned Parent specific. And we have the Women's March in Reno, virtual as well. This is, like I said, because we cover part of Nevada, we'll always have some Nevada options. And then tomorrow at noon, we have a storytelling campaign where you can just listen in. And I believe, if memory serves me correctly, that is going to be streamed on Facebook and Twitter. But I can put all of this in a quick email and send it over if folks are interested. But that's like a sampling of just some of the stuff we have coming up within like the next couple of weeks, just to let people know sort of what we offer, right? And then I will say also, if there are any things that folks really want to do or other ideas that you have, we're also always open to hearing about those because there's something that we might be missing, right? So that concludes what I wanted to share with folks. Here's my email address. Should you have any questions now or later? Also, Paula, you can feel free to share my contact information when you send stuff out. If there are any questions, I'm happy to entertain them. Any comments, concerns, and if not, I mean, thanks so much for the time. Well, Donna, I see it says Donna raised hands somewhere.
Let's give a big shout out, a Zoom shout out. Well, however you do that, to Dianna for a splendid presentation.
Oh, thank you. I hope it was interesting and you learned something.
Yes, I was very much updated. I learned a lot, and I have questions, but let's first of all open it up to others. So, anyone have a question we want to start with in asking? Let's see, from Nancy Palmer. I see something in chat and I see Donna has her hand up. So let's go with Donna. And Donna, unmute.
So I have two questions.
Sure.
One is, isn't one of those states that people can sue people in another state for aiding someone getting an abortion?
For SB 8?
I don't remember which state it is. I don't remember if it was Texas or Georgia or.
Oh, yeah. So I know in Texas, under the Texas law, I do not believe you have to be a Texan to sue a Texan.
Yeah.
So I, as a Californian, could get wind of Mary whoever in Texas that I don't even know, and I could sue her because I heard through the grapevine that she drove so-and-so to a health center.
Yeah, so I mean, that was, I knew that there was something like that, which makes it even worse.
It's preposterous. Like when I read it like 3 times when I first was told about it, because I'm like, I'm clearly the one who's not understanding, because that cannot be real. You don't have to have any connection to the person whatsoever. Like I said, it also doesn't have any like your abuser, your rapist could sue you, or could sue someone who helps you. Like there are no parameters to the who, what, when, where. I mean, it literally turns people into just like vigilantes and deputizes them. And a piece of the idea, especially when you think about the providers that provide people that provide the service, is if I have to go to court every single time somebody sues me, you're going to bankrupt me.
Yeah.
And even if I'm not guilty, right? We got calls. I mean, we received calls right as SB 8 went into law, and we heard stories about people, because in Texas, the providers were, providing services up until midnight. And we heard stories about people out in the parking lots taking pictures of license plates, like to then go and just like report them. Like one example.
Even worse, that the United States Supreme Court won't ban these laws. It makes it even
right. Well, and precedent shows that if there is so much controversy, right, with a law, typically, even if you don't ban it, you say we're going to pause it because we have a whole process in place for the last however many years, 200 plus years of this country, being in existence. We have a whole process in place. And instead of the Supreme Court following that precedent, which we've seen many times and which is considered normal, they have taken the stance that we're going to do nothing, thereby allowing the law to go into effect. And here we are.
Thank you for your question, Donna. Lillian, who has a
I have a question. During the COVID time, when it was really hard, even for me to see a gynecologist, I ended up going to the YMCA and seeing somebody. I couldn't get into my own. What happened to all the women and young people that may have wanted to terminate a pregnancy and weren't able to because there wasn't any access because of COVID? Do you have any statistics on that? Thank you.
I'd have to look to see if we have statistics on that, because I do know that, and I'll definitely look and I can get back to you. I know that we were still providing all of our services. I'm not certain if the number of people that accessed those specific services decreased. So I can check on that, but we did a hybrid of, we really upped our telehealth. So anything that could be done via telehealth, we tried to do so that we could keep folks getting services that they needed. And then if there were some services that just couldn't be done right via telehealth, then we would ask patients to please come in. And so that was a conversation sort of between the provider and the patient. And so some of the services, like if, for example, they would have to come in for if they were, certain types of abortion services. Yes. But I can look to see if we have data on that. we might have something from like the kind of like the first year of it. Because you know how you're always a little behind on the data. You're trying to collect it and analyze it and move on. But I can find out. But I do know that we definitely provided telehealth where possible. But I'll ask about that for you, Lillian.
So we have a question, Diana, in the chat.
Oh, sure.
What is the bounty in Texas for somebody who's let's see, for people going after the person helping?
I think it was 10,000.
Yeah,
is what if I remember correctly, it was 10,000 per person.
yes, that's my memory.
Right. Me too.
How about other questions? Oh, I see. Michelle, is that a hand up?
Yeah, it's just a clarification question on the, or a point of about the $10,000. Is it a civil lawsuit, if I remember correctly, that gets filed and not necessarily a criminal, though, correct?
I believe so. If memory serves me correctly, I believe so. Yes.
Not that that changes anything, but it's
Right.
an important distinction for some people. Yeah.
Right. And then if they're found guilty, they have to. It's a $10,000 reward that goes to the person that sued them.
So I don't see any other hands up, but I have a question.
Sure.
And this may be very out of date. Oh, and then Charlotte, I'll pass to you. Are there any federal funds these days for abortion services? Did Title IX, it used to be Title IX or something like that long ago, 30 years ago?
To my knowledge, no. You still cannot use any federal funds for that, for abortion services.
Okay. Charlotte, and then we have a request for Nancy Palmer to ask a question. So Charlotte.
Yes, thank you for this great talk. My question is about how to, what are some of the approaches that you think might be the most productive in reaching out to people who don't agree with us. So one approach that I'm working with a group that wants to show a film that attempts to engage audiences in a conversation, both sides in a conversation about abortion. And I mean, when I look at it, I see that basically all the pro-choice people, us, want is let everybody choose, that it's everybody's choice. And the opposition, the anti-abortion people are saying, no, we want to impose our way on you, and you cannot do what you want to do. You don't have a choice. So it's not a two-side. It's not really two equal sides. It's a very lopsided sort of fate. And nevertheless, there is a proposal to show a film called, I don't know whether you've heard of it. It's entitled "Beyond the Politics of Life and Choice." And it's just what I said. It's about starting a conversation. So can you give me your opinion as to how productive such a discussion would be? And
Sure.
Yeah.
I think if people truly want to have an open and honest discussion, I think that is valuable. I think if folks are willing to hear, and and I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the video, but there can be examples of there are all types of people that access abortion for a multitude of reasons. And I think if folks are willing to open their hearts and their heads to understanding and like hearing about that, it might be an interesting discussion. However, if you're trying to move someone who says you don't have a choice, and move them to, yes, I actually do have a choice, that's a slightly harder, that's a harder conversation to have, because at that point you're not actually talking about the issue itself, right? Like you're no longer talking about why this person should have bodily autonomy. You're not talking about why it is economically and emotionally and mentally and physically possibly the right decision for them, right? And so I'm absolutely happy to have like a longer conversation about this, because the last thing you do want is why do you want a heated debate that becomes mean-spirited, right? Like, because I understand that is not the intention, whatsoever. But I think it really depends on the folks in the room, because I can sit in a room and I can listen to why someone truly thinks that their thought is correct, and it might give me insight into why they think what they think, but I don't know that it would necessarily change my mind, right? And so I feel like it could help in some ways build, close some gaps in terms of understanding each other. But I think it just really depends on who is in the room. And I think it would be really important to have like solid training and understanding on like how to de-escalate, because this is it can be a very polarizing and a very emotional issue. And if you have anyone in the room that has had an abortion, it could also be something that is very triggering. So that's a tough one. But like I said, I'm absolutely happy to talk more offline with you about this, like as you move forward, because we also have like language that we can use that can help sometimes, right? Like with how we address things. We tend to try to not use so much like pro-choice and pro-life, because if you're pro-choice, that doesn't mean I'm not pro-life in this, like, right? You know what I mean? Like, and so what it means is that I appreciate the life of the person that is trying to make this decision, or I can like they're not necessarily like opposites, right? And so we try to start using other language that is like, oh, I am supportive of reproductive rights, versus someone having to say I am anti reproductive health care or reproductive rights, right? And one thing I will say, and I've worked in politics for quite some time, the more those that are more conservative in nature, they're very good at messaging, and they are very good at picking like small, like little things that you're like, oh, the Family First Act or whatever that one was. And it's like, I love my family. Of course I want to put my family first. And then you read what it is and you're like, that's actually not at all something that I subscribe to, right? And so just kind of, referencing like the importance of word choice and how we get to define in certain space, like we get to define what we are. I support reproductive health care, and if I am pro-choice, like I said before, like that doesn't mean I'm anti-life. It's the opposite of that, actually, right? So again, happy to have a more in-depth conversation like offline, and also maybe happy to bring in someone from like our comms team or something that can help with provide some insight on that, because we love the idea of people going out and having these conversations. Like, we don't want you to not have them, but we just understand that they can be challenging, and we want to give you all the tools possible so it is fruitful and successful.
So I want to make sure Reverend Nancy, did you want to make some comments?
I actually have ended up with a question after all, dear ones. I'm the senior minister at the First Unitarian Church of San Jose. I'm here thanks to Reverend Rowan, and I'm preaching about this on a Sunday morning in a service titled "Once to Every Soul and Nation Comes the Moment to Decide Why Reproductive Rights Matter to All of Us." So this is incredibly helpful, Diana. Thank you so much. Here's my question. The Unitarian Universalists nationally or many of us are honoring this anniversary, and we've put out some good resources. One of the pieces that I haven't had a chance to look at closely, but that I'd really love for you to address is this thought that Roe v. Wade is not just about abortion. So can you speak to that?
Sure, I think I can. And I also want to circle back to our new group called, it's our Faith Leaders Network. If we did not reach out to the two reverends on this meeting, I will be doing that shortly. I was like, I don't remember, but this is the universe talking to all of us together. Yeah, Roe v. Wade is absolutely not just about abortion. That just happens to be sort of like the topic, if you will, of it. But that's not, to say that it is only about that, I think is a grossly underestimates the power that legislation had. We all know that women and other people that get pregnant traditionally, on their face, like on its face, we make less, right? There are economic disparities that happen. And then if you couple that with people of color, right? So you've got exponentially more barriers. When you take away a person's ability to make a decision about themselves and their lives, you are stripping them of human dignity, and you are stripping them of the ability to be the best version of who they're supposed to be. So that is just one, being able to pick and select that an abortion is right for you is just one aspect of that, right? But in essence, you're also then saying that there is a vast change or a vast difference in the intelligence and the competence of the different genders. Why am I not savvy, intelligent, well-versed enough, educated enough? Why do I not know myself well enough to make the decision that's right for me, right? So I think that's another piece. It shows a lack of value of that person's ability to take and make decisions for themselves. The other piece of it, I think, is that there are, sort of in that same vein, Viagra is covered by insurance.
Yes.
I mean, great, but the counterpoint to that is that there's so many people in this world that don't have, and not even in this world, just in the United States, that don't have access to an abortion. I think the other component of that too is that it really just weighs differently on like I said, like how who we value and how we value them or don't value them. And then I also think about, we know, like, and there's tons of data that shows like the economic impact that having an unwanted or unexpected pregnancy has, right? So there's the economic impact, there's the mental impact. If you are in an abusive situation, if you were the victim of rape, if you just were never meant to be a parent in your heart, and that, right? So it takes away all of that from you. And I think, one of the things that I hear over and over again when people tell me their stories was like, I wouldn't be the person I was today. I wouldn't have had the opportunities I have today. I wouldn't have been able to do X, Y, Z if I hadn't had this service available to me when I needed it. I've had people that have said, like, I am now married and a mom of 3, but like, I have this because I had a service. I was able to like access a service before I was ready for all of this. And then I got to go to college. Then I got to take care of my mom who was ailing. Then I got to whatever the case is, right? And so I feel like one of the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, like you've taken away liberty. In some instances, you may be taking away, like the person who's carrying the fetus, you might be taking away their life or leaving them, forcing them into a situation, right? That if they're, for example, in an abusive situation where they could lose their lives. And so those are sort of some of the other aspects I think about when we think about how Roe just isn't about that. And there's really, there's very few other laws in place that are also about the difference between an individual and the common good, right? And I think that's another piece of it, is a personal decision. It impacts me, it's my person, versus a decision for the common good, like a red light means stop, right? Like, and I don't pretend to equate them that they're the same and perhaps, in certain like levels of severity, but that there's a common good, and that's one thing. Then there is I don't want you to make a decision for yourself because I don't want to. Also, I don't know you, nor do I know your life circumstance. No, do I know anything about you, but I'm going to tell you what's best for you. And that is a long-winded thing or like answer for why it's not just about actual acting.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough. I mean, you will be quoted, Diana, this Sunday morning, because I've been seeking that language, and it's so powerful coming from you. And it also, friends, I'm going to be talking about my own 2 abortions as well, and they happened 40 some years ago, and I'm a person of a lot of privilege, and my story isn't as dramatic as some. So but you've helped to name what was at stake for me that I couldn't have named even at the time so clearly. So I think that's really, really powerful, and I think it'll help all my folks a lot. Thank you.
Oh, I'm happy to help. Absolutely. And as a fellow person of faith, it is really it's nice to be in a space where there are others, right, who, because I think sometimes that can be seen as like contrary. I have told that I cannot be of my faith and have my job, and I'm here to tell you that I can. So
Diana has put her contact information in the chat. So also, Diana made a request, and that is that by 8:10.
Oh, since I wasn't feeling well, I canceled my I had to cancel, so don't worry about it. We're fine.
Oh.
I'm sorry. I should have told you that earlier. I apologize.
Okay. I was just being very aware of the time.
I so appreciate that. Thank you. I meant to tell you earlier. Yeah, since I was a bit under the weather, I figured it was best to not leave the confines of home.
All right. But I just do want to point, we probably have then just 5 more minutes before we do whatever it is that, at the end of our meeting, all of our announcements and the wrap up and all of that. But I do want to point out, if you save the chat, you will have Diana's contact information. Is there anybody who doesn't know how to save the chat? If you don't know how to save the chat, stay after and we'll show you how to save the chat. We won't take the meeting time to do it. Okay, Judy, I see you have your hand up.
Yeah, I put a brief comment in, and that is relating to faith. The real traumatic conflict is when you are told, if you are having an abortion consideration, that all life is holy. And even if the life engendered in your body came from rape or incest, you must then carry through that pregnancy and basically suffer from the trauma probably the rest of your life. And that's the position the person who says all life is sacred, even at 6 weeks, is immovable. And it's a position that causes such suffering for women who are victims of a crime. That's all I wanted to say, basically. Thanks.
And I do appreciate you you bringing that up. And I like I said, like as a person of faith, I'm never looking to be disrespectful of someone else's belief system. And I think that that's one of the reasons why we are really looking at we've started this faith network. And the reason for that is there are some faiths that are allies and are accepting of it, and there are some not so much. But what we've come to realize is not just for the patients, but also for the folks that work at the health centers, or maybe someone like me who has to be sort of public facing. It can be hard. People can be very unkind, and it's a charged issue. And as humans, sometimes it's a lot to carry. It can be a lot to carry. And so I think that, one of the reasons that we really wanted to start this faith network was to show that, that you can be a person of faith, and you can also fight for reproductive rights and support reproductive rights. And you, even if you are not of the same faith as that person, but if you are seeking the service, there's someone here for you to talk to, that you can have that conversation with. If you are feeling, whatever the feeling that you have is valid, and there's another person of faith that can have that conversation with you. I think it also, though, helps to show that when we see the wide variety of faiths that do support reproductive freedom, how important and valuable that is, right? If those faith leaders give a talk, a sermon on Sunday, if they're willing to pen an op-ed with other faith leaders, if they're willing to speak at a city council meeting, right? It shows that you're not in your fight alone. And that there are faiths that do understand, that do support, and that are there, and that are allies. And when we think about the fights that we've had and the fights that are going to come before us on this issue, we do it when we're strong together, right? These aren't issues that we can handle and we can fight on our own. So the larger the coalition of more backgrounds, of more lived experiences, the stronger that we become. Because sometimes someone just needs to see themselves reflected in someone else to suddenly have it be like, oh, that could be me, or, oh, I didn't think about it that way, right? And so that's why I think that's another reason why we do, like I said, like the Faith Leaders Network, why we have these volunteer events, so that we can continue to bring people together in that community and in that safe place, to give them the tools that they need to get out there and have those conversations, and be like those voices, and know that they're not doing it by themselves, that we're all here together supporting each other.
So Dianna, wasn't one of the
Excuse me.
wasn't one of the volunteer events you posted on your slide a storytelling, come and talk, wasn't that? And I think that's an excellent resource, because there's stories emerging in the chat, and I don't pay attention to the chat when I'm in a meeting, because I'm here in the meeting. But just I think that would be an I'm seeing that there are stories, whether they're Planned Parenthood stories or reproductive rights stories, and I just want to point that out, that one of your events was
Yes. And Paula, I just sent you an email with the 4 events, and like the links. So if you want to just forward it, I tried to stick it in the chat and it wasn't working. So I figured if I just forward it to you, that would be easier. So it's in Paula's inbox, folks. So she can get that over to you. My phone number and my email are also like in that block there, so you can do that. But yeah, I mean, like you said, like I was trying to go through here and look at some of these stories. And it's like somebody wrote about having to get a car loan signed, even though mom was working and supporting 4 kids on her own. Did I read that correctly and quickly? That's amazing. Like,
Yeah, this is wild.
amazing for mom, but also mom has her stuff together. She can get her own dog car.
She couldn't. She
But,
had to
right.
have the boss. She had to have the boss co-sign, because women in those days didn't have credit.
Right.
There was no credit cards back then, and she had no credit, even though she was supporting a family all by herself, no help from anybody. And she had to have her boss co-sign for the used car, not a new car, a used car.
Right. Yeah, and you know, like Paul said, it can be any type of story. It can be a story from you know, it doesn't have to be Planned Parenthood specific, and it can be about somebody that you knew, and it can be about anything, you know, reproductive health care related. Because another thing that we're realizing is and someone said this the other day, and I was like, oh, of course. I spoke to someone and she was like, oh, I was alive before the birth control, like the pill, was invented. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, it made me pause. And I'm like, not a spring chicken. But it made me pause for a second, because never in my head was I like, there are humans on Earth today, right? Like, that, what are you talking about? But of course, like when I think of the year, obviously, like it's not, it wasn't that long ago. But I grew up with it always being there. Right. And so it's things like that you're just like, it's important. And then for like even younger generations to be like, these are the stories. We have gained what we have gained because there were people before us who are willing to literally give their lives. Now we're in a spot where a lot is at risk. And so we will still be the people that, you know, years from now, they say in 2022, there were the people that were willing to go out there and fight for us so we can get to where we are today. Right. And it's so important to share some of those stories about what it used to be like, because for some women, it will be like that again, or it's never really changed for them based on where they live. Again, we're coming at this from the Bay Area, California perspective.
And I see Karen's hand. I think Karen wants to say something. Yes?
Just something I learned on Joe Biden, our president, President Biden, he's a Roman Catholic. He is very faithful. He's a Roman Catholic. He does not believe in abortion at all, not for any cause. But he believes that he has no right, or no one has any right, to tell a woman what to do with her body. And I was wondering, he's only mentioned that one time. I was wondering if we could get him to share that as a leader. He's president. And it was during the debate I heard that. And so even though he would never have anyone have an abortion in his life, so even leaders like President Biden, maybe we can get him to make a statement or say something. It was during the debate with Paul Ryan as vice president, where he actually made that announcement at the very end of the debate. I just wanted to mention that.
Okay.
That even our leaders, our biggest leader, our president, doesn't believe that anyone has a right to tell a woman what to do. That's her choice.
Dianna?
That's not the first time I've heard of elected sort of taking that position and sort of like having those ideas where, you know, they can, and, you know, where they can differentiate, right? Like, but again, that's a piece of that, going back to that concept of saying, like, so then does that make him pro-choice or pro-life? No, it makes him pro-reproductive health, and it makes him a supporter of reproductive rights.
Right.
And simultaneously, if you think about the definition of being like not the definition that like they have put on it, right? But it's like, that means that you are a defender of life as well. Like if you are a defender of reproductive healthcare, right? And so, you know, I think that is an interesting and an important distinction, that there is a space to understand that while it might not be the right decision for you, also as a man, you're never going to have to make that decision, but that's, I suppose, besides the point. But that, you know, while it might not be a decision that you would ever make, that does not mean that you then have a right to impose that on someone else. That someone else has a right to make that decision for themselves.
So Diana, we're getting up close to the announced time.
Right.
8:30, but it's really hard to take a pause and stop you, because this is, your answers are so interesting. They use language I'm just delighted to hear. So I'd like to encourage everyone to express your appreciation again for Diana and this wonderful presentation. Thank you.
Of course, I'm happy to have done it. Thank you.
And I encourage everyone to get active. You know, we don't know what's ahead. That's the title of tonight. We don't know who's coming to San Jose. I don't know who here remembers when Operation Rescue chose San Jose as one of their target cities. They had 3 of them. I was on the streets every day they were here, protecting clinics. And so you never know. And you never know, my city council, so here's another way to get involved. My city council, Saratoga City Council, did not ask the sheriff to protect the doctors' homes. And so it is a local issue. You do need to let your elected officials know where you stand. That's another way of getting active. We pleaded with them and they said, no, this is not an issue. This is a personal issue. And we went and protected the doctors' homes from Operation Rescue. So it's very local. It's very, very local. Pay attention, be alert, know what's happening. And take a big breath, because tomorrow it's 49. Yes, it's 49. There's going to be a lot of news. I believe there was an action today in Washington, D.C., where those who are not necessarily supportive of reproductive rights express their right to gather, hoping that there would not be a 50th. Well, we're here gathering, hoping that there's a 50th anniversary. At least I am. So let's hope and, get active, whatever you can do. Thank you for sharing all those resources too, Diana. That was really, really wonderful. So if you have any last minute questions, they go in the chat. That's where they go at this point, because we supposedly end in 5 minutes. We won't make it because we have announcements. And we have 2 short songs. The WILF isn't over until the Raging Granny sings, That's how it goes. So announcements. I think Joan has some announcements. Joan, you're our announcement person.
Well, I just wanted to indicate that, as people may know, tomorrow is the first anniversary of the activation of the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons. And a lot of people are doing things around the country about that. We have not planned anything as a group here in San Jose, although others may have. And I'm going to be sending out a an email about that that was produced by our one of our main people working on the issue, Cheryl Spencer in Palo Alto. So watch your email tomorrow for the information from her. Thank you.
Donna, you have an announcement?
Yes, I have two. One is, please go to the website, Protect Yuristock. Yuristock is a very sacred area for the Amamutsun tribal band. And so there's not enough time to really for me to explain everything about it, but there's a petition that you can sign on the website, and they need as much support as possible. There was going to be a DEIR, a draft environmental, I forget what all those letters stand for, report on round about the 16th of March. But right now we need as many people as possible to sign the petition. And I'm putting it in the chat.
Great.
Also,
Is that the area south of San Jose?
it's the area, yes, it's where San Benito, Santa Cruz, and Santa Clara County meet. And
Okay.
that whole area is very sacred area for the Amamutsun tribal band. And they want to make this very sacred area into a gravel mine. Grind it up into gravel.
All right.
That's one thing. The other is Leonard Peltier, the anniversary of his illegal arrest is on Sunday, the 6th of February. So we usually try to do something for him on these important dates, but because of COVID, we haven't been doing public things. So I don't know if we're going to do a Zoom event. In any case, go to the website and I'll put it in the chat. Who is Leonard Peltier.info? Please write him a letter. He's 77 years old and he's in very bad health and he really wants to go home.
Michelle, you have an announcement?
Just partially because the announcement hasn't completely gone out via email yet. We will be having another meeting, another community meeting on Wednesday of next week. Hopefully all the details will get posted and sent out via our email system on Monday. The Center and Collins Foundation are doing a in-depth kind of extended process of evaluating and redetermining kind of where we are and where we go from here, both with the House as well as with the pandemic and other things that have been going on through that time. And we welcome the community involvement in creating the next phase of wherever we go at this point moving forward. The details are on the Peace and Justice Center calendar. And like I said, it'll likely be going out in the email that we send out periodically. At this point, we haven't been sending it out as frequently as we used to. And of course, events and other things are welcome on the calendar, as well as if you have like a blog post or a call to action that's timed in a decent way, we can get it up as a blog post as well. So we are trying to support the groups locally to create that better space and better world that we all kind of, the justice that we need to have present in what we do and how we do it. But good to see everybody.
So I'd highly recommend the community meetings with the Collins Foundation. I learned so much that I didn't know. So, and WILPF and the Raging Grannies used to regularly meet. And so I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's a really, I found it very interesting. Charlotte, you are unmuted. Does that mean you want to speak? And then Rowan.
So yes, I just wanted to say that, there's the Raging Grannies of the Peninsula, and some other groups are rallying tomorrow in San Francisco in front of the federal courthouse on at 450 Golden Gate Avenue. That's the old federal building at 11:30 a.m. and in support of Roe v. Wade, and then in the afternoon, I think it's 1 p.m. or so, we're counter protesting the anti-choice people at City Hall. So just to let that announcement be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Both of those are San Francisco?
Yeah, these are both San Francisco, so it's just two blocks away between these two.
And Rowan?
I just wanted to mention that WILF US voted. Our branch voted, and so did everybody else. And we're doing two actions this year, one of which is support for the Poor People's Campaign. And the first meeting of the committee to plan WILF's involvement is January 24th. And if anybody is at noon, I think, if anybody's interested, maybe 1 o'clock. I'd have to look it up. Sorry. Didn't plan to do this, but I thought this is the group that should know. But if anybody's interested in helping plan WILF's involvement with the Poor People's Campaign to June 18th, 2022 and beyond, our first meeting of the planning group is January 24th.
All right.
Just ask me.
Any other announcements? Because you know what's next. It's the Raging Grannies, if we're done.
One more thing.
Yes, quickly.
Oh, the good news is the AB 1400 has passed. It's going to go on to the full assembly of the San Jose State Assembly. So AB 1400 is CalCare, California Guaranteed Health Care for All. So there's some good news. There is some good news happening.
Right. All right, we'll end on good news. We've had not only some really informative, interesting, well done presentation on Roe v. Wade and what's ahead. Again, thank you to Dianna for doing that. It's really wonderful, wonderful meeting. And if we're done, you know the routine, you mute yourself, and then one of us, and I'm afraid it's me this time, that was how the bargain played out. I don't know how smart that is, but here it is anyway. Do you remember 99 bottles of beer on the wall, 99 bottles of beer? Okay, that's the tune. Okay, get that tune in your head, because these words don't have anything to do with bottles of beer on the wall. Absolutely nothing. So here we go. They want to take away our freedom of choice, nullify Roe v. Wade, intimidate women and stifle our voice, terrorize doctors and make them afraid. All of this talk about right to life, the life of the child unborn. But after the birth, where are their rights? If they are poor, they get nothing but scorn. We should support the mother and child, help the child thrive and grow. But helping is something the fascists revile. That would cost money, so no, no, no. This is testosterone poisoning that women alone can repair. We will change course and we will bring sanity, wisdom, and healing care. Therefore, nefarious laws must go. Texas, you must defer. Women will lead and we will show how to create a better world. Okay, we got through that one. And here comes the familiar one. But, you know, as usual, we add some verses. Rowan, do you...
When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number. When we make peace instead of war, when Roe v. Wade remains the law, when Roe v. Wade remains the law, how I want to be in that number. When Roe v. Wade remains the law. When choice is known as a human right, when choice is known as a human right, how I want to be in that number. When choice is known as a human right. When women's rights are federal rights, when women's rights are federal rights, how I want to be in that number. When women's rights are federal rights. When we make peace instead of war, when we make peace instead of war, how I want to be in that number when we make peace instead of war.
Thank you for coming, everyone. It's wonderful to see you. Thank you for Dianna for a wonderful, wonderful program. I think you'll be hearing from some of the people here tonight, and some people who are have other groups that will probably be asking you to spread the word. Okay, so thank you. Good night, all dear WILF activists. Stay active.